Oh, hey, didn't see you there. Just doing the dishes. Did you know that human memory sucks? The Mandela Effect is the mass remembering of incorrect details in our lives. The name originates from the mass remembrance of Nelson Mandela dying in prison in the 80s, when actually he was still alive and in jail until his death in 2013. Most examples focus on very minute details in our average day-to-day lives. And unlike my ability to make good introductions, people actually do believe in this. When first exploring this effect, it took me by surprise how many of them actually related to me. And at first it felt like the world was a lie, so I took to the streets to see what the public thought. Hey everybody, I'm freezing my ass off here in Washington Square Park, and today we're gonna ask some people some questions about the Mandela Effect. Kit Kat, does it have a dash?
No hyphen.
There is a hyphen
There's
in
a
Kit Kat.
hyphen in Kit Kat?
Alright, so do you know what the Mandela Effect is?
Yes.
Yeah, so are you a believer?
I think so. I know, you know the Berenstein Bears one?
Yeah, the
Berenstein and
Bears.
the Berenstein. I mean,
Yeah.
I think there is maybe some truth to it.
Febreze with 2 E's or 1 E?
2 E's.
1 E.
No way.
After a couple good interviews, I felt like I was making a lot of progress, even informing the public. But that's when a naysayer changed my entire perspective.
I did not forget it, I never knew it. It was coming in through my eyes, but it wasn't registering in most of those cases. And that's different than forgetting. That's not paying attention.
He was right. All of these examples are instances where we don't retain the information that we perceive. And that's a lot different than misremembering something in its entirety. I spoke to my friend Peter about this in more depth.
I don't believe in the Mandela Effect. I think it's a bunch of people collected together that thought they remembered something right, but they remembered it wrong, and they just don't want to accept the fact that they're wrong. There's a Beatles song called "Love You Too," and my entire life I've been calling it "Love to You," because in the song they say "I'll make love to you," but it's called "Love You Too." So I had an argument with my father about this because he was always arguing with me like, no, it's "Love You Too." Some people argue this, they're saying like, oh, it's the Mandela Effect where people went back in time and they changed all the Beatles albums, they changed all the Revolver track lists, and they changed it to "Love You Too" instead of "Love to You." But I'm not going to argue that because this is such a minor thing that I got wrong. It's also something wrong with the lyrics too. It's such a minor thing that I don't believe that I don't believe that something weird happened in the universe to make that happen. I just believe like I just been reading it wrong this entire time. And I think it's like that for pretty much every example of the Mandela Effect.
This perspective changed my entire focus on this project. And we actually spent a lot of our interview disproving common Mandela effects by the use of saying that we perceive a lot more than what we retain, and that information is just missing.
Like the Febreze logo.
Febreze logo that's exactly my thing. If you were to write Febreze on paper, you probably spell it as Febreze because you know the word breeze is spelled with 2 E's. They'll probably just pick up the bottle when they buy it at the store. They see it says Febreze. They're not always looking at the spelling, you know.
Like Febreze, many forms of branding like logos and packaging are often overlooked, and that leaves a lot of room for our brains to put in information that is close enough to correct that we'll just believe it. Other names, words, and commonalities amongst our daily lives also can explain how these mix-ups occur. I spoke to one of my interviewees, and they explained how this happens similarly in the English language.
It's interesting also to me to see when social issues like this, when the mistake starts becoming a de facto accepted practice.
Yeah, exactly.
For example, it always bothers me to see complementary and complementary.
Yes.
And what the linguists tell me is that we're just moving toward complementary with an I to cover both meanings, just because no one gets it right, so we're like, let's move on with ourselves.
For me, the most compelling Mandela effect was the Fruit of the Loom logo. I always saw the cornucopia, and I even mentioned that in my interviews. Fruit of the Loom with the cornucopia or no cornucopia? This one's like the biggest one to me.
The cornucopia.
Nope, no cornucopia.
How could there not be a
Like,
cornucopia?
even in fictional representations of Fruit of the Loom, like in South Park and stuff, they
Yeah.
all have cornucopias on them.
Just fruit. It's just fruit.
It's just fruit, though.
Oh my
There's
God.
never been a logo since 1880. For me, the cornucopia couldn't have really come from anywhere else. It wasn't associated with the branding of Fruit of the Loom or any products associated with that clothing company. And Peter did have an explanation for that, too.
Like I have a painting in my living room, and there's the cornucopia right behind it. My grandma has one like that. My aunt has one like that. We literally have a cornucopia, like a little ceramic one, like full of like a bunch of fruit, or at least like a basket. You know, there's always it's something like everyone has seen like fruit enough like in a basket together that I feel like they just automatically add it to their brain.
So if these explanations are so plausible, then why do people still believe it? In my opinion, I think it stems from a general mesmerization from seeing these imperfections. They spoke more about this with the philosopher Ian Olasov.
There's also a question which is sort of like, why do we find it so like compelling or mesmerizing? And that's not a strictly psychological or sociological question. So it's like when you have a kind of emotional, broadly speaking, emotional response to some fact out in the world. And here the emotional response, I think, for a lot of people is to find it like sort of, awe-inspiring or astonishing or miraculous, or at the very least for it to provoke like a really intense sort of curiosity. The effect is not magic, it's not a supernatural thing. There is a sort of very natural, supernatural explanation of it. There's like a sort of like, it's the first thing that comes to mind in a way. It's like, there must be some sort of, imperceptible, tissue that connects all of our minds in some way and sort of leads us in one direction or another.
Like-minded people who share these emotional experiences often are more likely to connect. And Ian agrees with this.
I would expect to have all sorts of things in common with the people around me. We're looking at the same stuff, we live in the same country, whatever. What I wouldn't expect, on the face of it, is for us to, both believe that Shazam, some made-up movie with Sinbad, happened in the 90s, or the Fruit of the Loom example that you emailed about. This is a weird and deep type of bond that ties people together.
I think it's very important at this point to distinguish the difference between fanatical Mandela Effect fans and the more casual believer. The casual believers are more people who find these discrepancies to make in conversation or to make lists, but there are also fanatics who believe that this effect explains parallel universes or other dimensions, and these people should be classified differently.
People who sort of casually think that the logo includes a cornucopia, and then it's just, they sort of sustain one another through communicating, and that's just an echo chamber because there's no conspiracy, there's no attempt to discredit people from outside. But then these sort of more fanatical meetup groups that you're talking about, that sounds like you're getting into filter bubble territory.
These filter bubbles are very dangerous because they bend the rules of the world around them just to forward their point and make sure that anyone who doesn't agree with their experience of phenomena really don't have a voice to the people who follow them. These groups should be treated with the same severity that flat earthers are treated. After all this discussion on the Mandela Effect, I feel like I've thoroughly disproven it, but I can never be 100% sure. That cornucopia always did look like it belonged there.